Hi, I'm Karen Nelson. Welcome to the BAC if you're new to us. Um, I'm Dean of the School of Architecture and a big fan of Aisha Densmore Bay. I just want to say some brief remarks and then I'll hand the podium over to Aisha. Designers are inherent optimists. We're passionate about our environment and its hidden potential. Through our work, we try to reshape both our physical surroundings and our core values, remaking the world into a medium that reflects our best selves. This spring, we bridge the architectural and the cinematic, exploring the profound connection between spatial design, acoustic experience, and human emotion. We're invited to consider the emotional journey of cinema, as that term is from Juliana Bruno, scholar of cinema and architecture, and how motion defines our experience of modernity and our constructed environment. The Boston Architectural College remains dedicated to educating all who aspire to be environmental designers, a mission of radical welcome that drew Dr. Aisha Densmore Bay to our community. As a faculty member and education director, Aisha has focused our attention this spring on the vibrant intersection of filmmaking and design. A true multi-hyphenate, architect, artist, graphic designer, writer, filmmaker, and more, Aisha has leveraged her expertise to establish this inclusive student film festival. Thank you, Aisha, for shining a light on the BAC and for championing the vision of our and other student design filmmakers. Aisha.
All right, all right. So first off, I want you all to indulge me a little bit. So I want you to go like this. Can you put your arms out? Go like this. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. And with that, we just call action on the very first Design Student Film Festival. Pretty fly, right? Yes, pretty fly. So I want to welcome you all. And for those of you who are not from Boston, welcome to Boston. Couple of things. So first, if you all need anything, I want you all to say hello to the wonderful volunteers who are actually filming in the back. Wave hi, volunteers. And afterwards, for anyone who is not familiar on how to get to the Coolidge Corner Theater, we will be having two kind of caravans, one leaving at 7:05, another one leaving at 7:10 to go to the Coolidge for anyone who needs guidance. And lastly, I just want to repeat what Karen said. Please silence your phones. And for those of you who are online, please make sure your computers are on mute because there is nothing more unattractive than having phones ringing during or talking in the background when someone is speaking. So thank you for that. There are many hands that have worked on this festival and helped bring this to life. And I want to start by honoring them. So first, thank you to our incredible sponsors, especially Envision Resilience. Anyone from Envision Resilience here tonight? Hi. This festival and the way that it's happening now literally would not happen without you. So thank you for being here for students and for investing in storytelling. So thank you. And to our other sponsors, thank you very much for joining the DSFF family. Thank you for showing up, not just financially, even though that helped, but with real enthusiasm and care, helping us to create something meaningful. Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you very much to the Boston Architectural College, Dean Karen Nelson. Did she? She may have. Oh, there she is. Hi. So Dean Karen Nelson, the School of Architecture, Beth Wendell Garver, and the Practice Department, Richard Griswold, and the Office of Student Life, and Sarah Howard, who is probably at Hive Week right now, Vice President of Advancement and Strategic Relations. You all have shown me incredible kindness and warmth and unwavering support while I've been here at the BAC. And the BAC feels like home. And it's because of the wonderful way that you've treated me and welcomed me here. So thank you. Thank you. I'm lucky to call you all colleagues and friends. Thank you. Uh, Thank you to our media partner, official media partner, the Boston Globe. Boston Globe. And I want to give a quick shout out also to Metropolis Magazine and also to Archinect, who mentioned the festival. And thank you very much. I felt all special and famous for a minute. So thank you. Thank you. And of course, because I'm sorry, didn't advance the slide. Because this is a festival by me and anyone who knows me, I will not have any kind of event unless there's dessert involved. I invite all of you to go to JP Licks to enjoy the official festival dessert sundae, the final cut. And for those of you who aren't into sweets, number one, what's wrong with you? But number two, if you're not into sweets, there are coupons out on the table. You can enjoy JP Lick's official organic and fair trade coffee at a really reasonable price for the festival. Okay, so now this festival, I will say, this particular festival, the first one, leans a bit more towards architecture. But of course it does because I am an architect. But the vision for the festival is much bigger. So the goal is to bring all the creative disciplines together. So think Virgil Abloh with architecture and clothing and fashion and culture, Christopher Nolan with film and architecture, and two more of my personal favorites, Charles and Ray Eames, bringing the many disciplines of design with film and storytelling. I believe the work gets stronger when the boundaries are blurred. But I want you all to think of this as a bit of an art house film festival. Multiple perspectives, different skill levels, different aesthetics, and in some cases, different languages, all having conversations with one another. This is also a place to experiment, to be rough, and to be seen. So we are asking all of you to give us a little grace as well. This is our first film festival, so we may stumble, and we hope that you can forgive us. As the steward of this inaugural film festival and also as an artist myself, it means a great deal to me that these filmmakers choose to share their work and their vulnerability with us. I also want to recognize the schools that encourage the students to submit and the students who answered that call. So from this moment forward, these schools will be recognized as our foundation schools. Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena, the Boston Architectural College, the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, the ICAR Film School in Paris, Emerson College, DePaul University, Harvard University, the Graduate School of Design, Hobart and William Smith Colleges, Maine College of Art and Design, Massachusetts College of Art and Design, Mass Art, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, of course, MIT, RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, the Royal College of Art in London, Syracuse University, Tuskegee University, and the University of Manchester in the UK. I'm so proud. I'm really, really proud. And I would also like to have all of our student filmmakers stand. So if you could stand, please. Thank you. Thank you all for saluting them. So this event is really an exercise in community building, disguised as a film festival. I started this film festival because we live in a city here in Boston filled with architecture schools, art schools, and design programs. Creativity is literally bouncing off the walls in this town, right? But I don't think there is nearly enough collaboration as there should be. Architecture students should be talking to graphic designers should be working with filmmakers should be collaborating with urban planners, product designers, and topographers, all of it. So I wanted to create the conditions for that to happen through film. which is a medium that exposes our passions, emphasizes our humanity, and builds empathy. My hope is that some of you meet today, and 10 years from now, when you are collaborating on a wonderful project, you say, we met at the Design Student Film Festival. Or one of you starts your own creative festival. It doesn't have to be film, but your own creative event one day, and you repeat these words. Relish collaboration. Bring others with you. Be kind, and keep creating, because the world needs more artists. Now, this festival itself is an exercise is a result, not an exercise, a result of community building. So I'm going to tell you how we got here. So about 3 years ago, I was actually giving a lecture here in Cass Hall, and I was about to end my doctoral program, and I was asked to teach a course. So after I graduated, I asked Dean Karen Nelson if I could teach a hands-on course about architecture and film. And her response was, "Splendid, love it, let's do it." Which is what you want to hear, right? Of course. So that became the course that I teach now, architecture, film, and the craft of visual storytelling. And during that class, I reached out to another friend, who just happened to have designed the expansion of my favorite movie theater here in Boston, the Coolidge Theater. And I said, "Hey there, friend. My students are going to be learning about theater design, and so the architecture of theaters. So here, just show my students around, show off your fancy new theater, and and talk about your design process." And so said friend said, "Yes, of course. Yeah, let's do that." So I said, "All right, cool." Students loved it. My students really, really had a good time. Some of them are still talking about it this day, just to let you know. And then afterwards, at the end of the semester, those students premiered their films at the Coolidge Theater to family, friends, and to a lot of the BAC community. So a few months later, and I do mean a few, it was like 2 months later, I went back to Dean Nelson. I said, "I want to start a film festival for students. What'd you think?" To which her response was, "Fantastic, let's do it. Let's figure out a way to do it." Again. So after I contacted the Coolidge, make sure that they were available during this weekend, I called said friend again and said, "Hey there, buddy. So I want to start a film festival. Would you be, I know you're kind of busy, I know you're all over the place, but is it okay if you be the opening night speaker and talk about the Coolidge Theater, since we're having the opening night film at the Coolidge?" And he was like, "Got you. Yeah, yeah." So it is my pleasure to introduce that friend to you. Mr. Eric Höweler, a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, is an architect, designer, and an educator. He is co-founding partner of Höweler Yoon and professor in architecture at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, where he is the program director for the Masters of Architecture program. Höweler's design work and research focuses on building technology integration and material systems. His projects range from cultural buildings and mixed-use residential buildings to public spaces and interactive environments. Recently completed projects include the Living Village at Yale Divinity School, the MIT Museum at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers at the University of Virginia, and the Coolidge Theater expansion, which we are all going to see tonight. Höweler's work has been exhibited widely, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Smithsonian Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum in New York City, and the Venice Biennale. He is the co-author of Expanded Practice with Princeton Architectural Press, Verify in the Field, Projects and Conversations, Höweler Yoon, and author of Design for Construction, The Tectonic Imagination in Contemporary Architecture. Please help me welcome my friend Eric Höweler to the podium. Yes.
Thanks, Aisha. It was sort of like that. I think I said, splendid, let's do it. No, of course, anything for Aisha. Last time we talked about theaters, is that little check mark still there? That is. Anyways, we talked about theaters, we talked about storytelling, we talked about community building, and I think architecture does all those things. So I called this talk Screen Time because it seems like I was talking to my 15-year-old about screen time. Architecture, attention, and atmosphere. Because I do think we're always casting architecture in a way against media. You know, we're competing. Walter Benjamin talks about architecture sort of experienced in a state of distraction. So as architects, we think about attention. We sort of curate attention. We think about atmospheres, immersive environments. And I didn't mention the community building, but that is the thing that architecture can do that other things cannot. So I wanted to start, I don't know what that check mark is. Now my attention is distracted. Can you see it? Okay, try not to see it. See if that works. So I wanted to show you some of my favorite things. My favorite things include this space, which I hope you recognize from Mass MoCA. This is James Turrell's incredible installation. And when I go in a space like this, I kind of think like, how do you do that? How can I figure that out? And so I'm always wondering, not just the effect, but also the kind of the armature that produces that effect. And unlike architects that publish their details, artists do not. So I've tried to find out how it was made, but I have been looking at James Turrell for a long time. I think a lot of architects do. It's the medium of light, and it's not just light, it's the medium of our bodies, right? We're experiencing light within our eye. And they say that the artwork isn't on the wall, it's actually in our retina, you know. And someone else smarter said, you don't see with your eyes, you actually see with your brain, you know. So like it's the processing. And I think James Turrell's work sort of occupies that space, both in the retina and in the kind of gaps between, you know, the world and our brain. So the work, as you know, plays with light, plays with space, plays with illusion, and produces effects that seem to be surreal. They seem to be unbelievable. And so I sort of wonder, like, can architecture also employ these same techniques, the techniques of scale, of illusion, of perception, maybe sometimes a sleight of hand. I like to say that architecture makes us look twice. It makes us want to lean in and peek our heads through the window, figure out how it's made. And the best architecture isn't just about spectacle and entertainment. It's actually about nuance and subtlety and making us sort of look more carefully. So for me, Turrell exemplifies all those things. And so how do you make this effect, this sort of endless space that seems to recede? I always try to figure it out. So I try to draw it. I was like, maybe it's like this, you know? And I've been sort of curious about like the detail. So maybe it's a tapered knife edge with a kind of, you know, and I sent it to a friend of mine and he's like, it's not like that. It's actually like this, you know? So he red marked my Turrell detail, but it does employ these tricks, the kind of the filleted corner, the indirect cove light, the knife edge over here. The actual space is tapered, right? It's not flat, it slopes down. And the corners are filleted. And that's how we get that effect. But in my architecture, I've also thought about how can we use architecture as a sort of instrument to see the world, right? We have these sort of windows. Windows are famously also screens. And so this is one of our first projects when we launched our practice, a house. A house as a way to look at the landscape. And so this was our study model. We said 4 bedrooms looking at the landscape. And that was the idea. And we hoped that that's what we built. We built this sort of bridge house that sort of focused on the landscape. And to sort of dematerialize the thickness of architecture, we sort of tapered the edges into these sort of knife edge profiles, maybe borrowing a trick from James Turrell. But that's how you get this effect of like the architecture, its thickness almost vanishes into the kind of oblique, and then it sort of dematerializes the building. Another building related to that one is this house we did more recently called the Plus House. And this one is in a beautiful site. And so it's also a kind of way to look at the landscape. And so this was a study model. This is the house as it's built. It's sort of, it's not just a knife edge detail, it's actually a knife edge space. The whole space is tapered. And the poché is where the fireplace is. It's where all the kind of services are. And the section actually takes a kind of 2-story space and sort of brings it down into a 1-story space. So the knife edge went from being a detail to being a kind of spatial device. And you get moments like this where the view out is sort of celebrated, and it is a beautiful view. We get moments like this. We're sort of looking back at the house, and the kind of thickness of things is a little bit mysterious. And maybe that's one of the qualities of this architecture, is that it's not always evident exactly what's going on. You sort of have to look more carefully. And that idea that we're cultivating a kind of viewership, we're cultivating a kind of discerning eye, I think is what makes architecture and film kind of similar. We're sort of building audiences together, audiences that are equipped and literary in the sense of reading space, reading sound, reading attention. I'm always sort of brought back to images like this. Le Corbusier is sort of sketching in a way, the home for the modern man. It's like, here's the heroic person, this landscape is outside, but the architecture is just a frame, right? The glazing is just a layer stretched between inside and outside. And in my teaching on architecture and technology, I often teach about windows, window walls, curtain walls, but I often bring in the sort of, what is the intent? What is the kind of cultural dimension? How does it address our contemporary spectatorship? This is a kind of Herbert Bayer drawing of Bauhaus artist that was sort of thinking about space, content, exhibition, legibility. Interestingly, the man is rendered as an eyeball, right? A kind of a viewing subject that's sort of looking, and in a way, the exhibition is meant to create a kind of panoramic array of tiled screens that are addressing the viewer, from every angle. I like to think about the sort of blurring between screen and window, right? This is a TV screen in a window, a kind of fantastic moment. This is when I think Queen Elizabeth was being crowned and everybody was sort of watching the TV. This is before TVs were pervasive, right? A kind of scarce commodity. So you stand in a window to watch the TV. And then I did work on this project in a former life, the building as window, as screen, and the kind of view of the water, also the view on the screen. And so the sort of multiplication of these sort of cinematic moments of sort of flickering light and water, I think, is what makes the space one of my favorite spaces in Boston, a kind of magical room to sort of think. I found this commercial from Panasonic years ago, and it's like Panasonic sort of carves the window out of the world, but its inversion of frame and screen is kind of interesting. And I think when we think about architecture, the proliferation of screens, the competition for our attention, I think all these questions are relevant. How does architecture become an interface between us and each other? How do our screens become interfaces between us and each other? And can we function without these things, and in the presence of Rembrandt, we're still sort of locked into our devices. So this is what, makes me think about architecture as a kind of tool, an instrument for calibrating attention. And how do we do that? We use light, we use form, we use space, we use material. So this idea of a kind of ray of light, and I've been thinking that light went from illumination as a kind of way to make architecture visible, make ourselves visible, to communication. It's actually signaling now. And with our ability to control light, light bulbs are not just about producing, lumens. They're about flickering messages. They're about communicating things. This green light is no accident. It comes on at certain times and it's telling us something. And we as citizens in the city are sort of decoding those. The building in Boston, the steady blue, clear view, flashing blue, clouds due, steady red, rain ahead, flashing red, snow instead. We are encoded. We're decoding and encoding signals. One of my favorite philosophers is Walter Benjamin, who wrote the quote, architecture is experienced in a state of distraction. He was interested in the kind of phantasmagoria of the modern city, the metropolitan subject wandering through these new spaces of capital, immersed in commodities, shopping, window shopping. He described the subject as a flaneur, as someone who wanders through the city and just soaks it in, and this flaneur he describes as the kind of ultimate modern subject. I imagine it's this guy right here. They're all flaneurs. We're all flaneurs. We're all window shopping. Just walking up Newberry Street today, I was like, oh, what's new? Something is happening in the city. I wonder about Benjamin and his flaneur if he were all of a sudden dropped into here. Can you imagine this sort of metropolitan subject from the 1920s? I put him in there, wandering around, sort of in a world awash with images. How can we sort of still focus? How can we be thoughtful? How can we be introspective? How can we be together, right? This idea of community. So this is the backdrop, I think, of our contemporary moment. I like to talk about architecture as a form of media. What is it saying in this form? What is it saying in this form? And how has architecture tried to embody these things? Has it sort of fused or collapsed? The thing about the frame, the sign, the billboard, famously. Some of my favorite movies, talking about Giuliano Bruno, Ramble City and Blade Runner, architects love this movie. It is an image, presumably, of our present. In some ways, we've overtaken this. And those speculations from the early 80s of a kind of city of constant signaling and messaging. And this has after images, right? Other projects, other movies, like this is, I think, Ghost in the Shell. Imagine a kind of metropolitan condition where our interfaces and our buildings are somehow transformed. They're no longer static, they're sort of dynamic. And last night I was thinking about, one of my favorite films is Wim Wenders' Until the End of the World, which is a kind of the ultimate sort of road movie. But in Until the End of the World, if you haven't seen it, see it. The premise is nuclear fallout, electronics are lost, and people are obsessed with their memories and capturing memories. So this is a device that records memories, and they become enamored with their own memories until they can no longer function. They're just sort of sprawled on the floor looking at their dreams, playing their dreams over and over. It's kind of apocalyptic. But this image from the end of the movie looks a lot like, any airport lounge you go into, right? Any subway station, people are just like, so this is a kind of crisis. And how do we respond, right, to this idea and to this idea, the kind of distancing between ourselves of all these screens. Back to this image. So a lot of our work has to do with publicness, and I think architecture is a public art form. And this image of the Central Pompidou with people interacting with people, forming in a way these sort of organic sort of assemblies of people, and the kind of performance and the spectacle of it. This is in a way a romantic image, and in a way I sort of yearn for this moment, and not the one where everyone's sprawled out on the floor looking at their phones. So I'm going to show you a couple of projects. Our first project, probably ever, which we did when Mijin was teaching at MIT, was this white noise, white light, where we said, what if you walk through a field and you left a trail of flickering light? What if that was it? That was architecture. It was just a trace of your movement with light and sound. And we installed this in Athens in 2004 for the Olympics. It was up for 30 days. It was flickering. It was ephemeral. It created a kind of shh sound, sort of white noise sound. And it introduced us to the world of electronics. And at the time, in 2004, this I thought was the future of architecture. It was going to be smarter. It was going to be responsive. It was going to be dynamic. And it was going to bring people together in space. And that's important. It's not just about effects. It's about community. It's about collectivity. It's about people gathering in a space that is conducive to that kind of activity. Another immersive environment, now that was maybe 25 years ago, now more recently, was the L'Anandie, the ScreenTime project, which was meant to be a temporary public space. And we produced the components, we did the microcontrollers, we did the fabrication. This is Höweler Yoon in its sort of adolescence. So from light and sound to plastics and light and sound to create moments like this. And we designed the space frame, we designed and built all the swings, and it became this incredible attraction in the seaport. In fact, if you went, you couldn't even get a swing because they were so much in demand. And we thought, there's something about play that's important. And not just play for kids, but play for everybody. Like, why would grown-ups stop playing? Why can't we have this? And this was so great. There was a beer garden next to it, I'll say. And that accelerated the play. And so the Convention Center Authority said, hey, can we have some do's and don'ts? Maybe some more do's than don'ts, because there's lots of don'ts. And there's evidence everywhere of the don'ts. Social media in its infancy. So we produced these. This was fun. Like, what should we do? We should do this. We should do this. Yes, you can do that. You can sort of push gently. You can do this. Not this. This is too much. And not this. And not this. No smoking, please. No pushing. Drink responsibly, please. Or enjoy responsibly. Don't leave your luggage unattended. Don't take our swings. Don't bonk them. You can take selfies. You can play games, be musical, have fun. I don't know what that is. Not sure what that is. You know, pick up after your dogs. Urban farming is good. Don't do this. So we had a lot of fun, you know, thinking about code, social codes, you know, we're encoding all the time, and our environments are helping us to encode. This is right and this is wrong. This is the difference between decor and decorum. This is my favorite one. So this is a do. Anyways, this was a little bit of a detour into the idea of publics, the idea of architecture as an enabler for community, the idea that technology can enhance, amplify, extend this. And at this moment, we theorize this idea that media is a material. You know, we teach concrete, we teach brick, we teach stone, we teach glass, but could we think about media as an augmented dimension? And then, so now we're in our midlife. We started this project, Media After Material. We're like, oh, we can still work on stone, but we can work on stone with computation. And so in our midlife, we did this project, and that's the Collier Memorial at MIT, which we carved stone with robots, and we sort of produced sort of unique spaces, some of the acoustic properties of those spaces, but definitely leveraging technology in a different way, technology applied to material. I came across this diagram, which I love. This is by Aldo van Eyck. Simple diagram. Concavity brings us together. Convexity sort of pushes us apart. And, you know, that's oversimplified. But when I think about public and making of publics and bringing people together, I think about this idea of concavity. You know, can we sort of be together? This is Downtown Crossing, which was an old MBTA head house, which you transformed into an amphitheater. So here you see the kind of parallel between the stair and the amphitheater. We sort of found 1,000 square feet of public space where there was none before, which was important to allow that residential tower to be developed. But here we are sort of learning how to work in the city, how to sort of give and take. You give something back, you get to build a tall building. I walk by this all the time, and I see people enjoying it. They're dancing, they're performing. Love it. I love how people use the space. You know, we supplied outlets, you know, outlets for plugging in speakers. Like just an outlet sort of promotes a different kind of publicness, I think. So how does architecture enable that? And then I'll end on the Coolidge, which is our sort of destination. We started this project in 2016. I was just checking, 2016, 10 years ago. And I understand they were working on it way before us. So I think we were the third architect that worked on it. When we interviewed, and this is about storytelling, how do you tell a story about architecture? And so we wanted to build a story around mood and ambiance. We said it is a place of wonder. You know, it's not a movie theater, it's a place of wonder. It's where people come together who love movies. It's a community for film lovers. You recognize this picture? Where's it from? Cinema Paradiso. What a great movie. I love that movie. Little kid just sitting there watching the magic lights. So when we were interviewing, we spoke to them in their language. You know, we talked about movies that we love. We talked about architecture and detail. It is an Art Deco theater, and that's part of its belovedness. But I told them in the interview, I said, Art Deco is not a style. They're like, what are you talking about? Art Deco is definitely a style. I said, no, Art Deco is an attitude about the new. It is an attitude about technology. It is an attitude about progress. It is about optimism. And it happened to coincide with radio and electricity and movies, but it's really about spectacle. It's about a spirit of the new, right? And so in my interview, I told this story. I told them something that they didn't expect. They expected me to say, we're going to do an Art Deco in a contemporary way. Well, we did, but I wanted to sort of surprise them with a different take on Art Deco. So And I said we spoke their language. We sort of played out all the hits from the kind of black and white utopias to, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, Helen Mirren in The Cook, the Thief, his wife. Look, she's got a white dress on. She comes into the hallway and her dress is red. Ooh. That's awesome. That's awesome. This is Peter Greenaway. So we had a red room and a blue room, and we told stories about light and sound and effects and perception and community building. And so this is what it used to look like, the back of the Coolidge, you know, the parking lot with the dumpsters and the fire escapes. And then the new front, which we said, this is the new Center for Community for Film Lovers. We turned the back into a front. So we did a little bit of a kind of magical trick. Lots of, you know, technical things. In our interview, I told stories. I told a story about Gina coming to watch a movie with her grandmother, Rose. And we said, we're going to meet you at the theater. And then we sort of charted their movements through the space. And Rose took the elevator and Gina took the stairs, and they met, and then they saw a movie, and then they met each other afterwards. And that kind of storytelling, I think, was persuasive, that we used architecture to tell those stories, to enable those moments where Rose and Gina could get together again. There's also lots of technical challenges, you know, adding to a theater, erecting a theater. This was its own kind of spectacle as we sort of watched this little structure emerge. You know, I said an old building that gets an addition, you don't come right up to the theater, you have to sort of kiss it, you know, and so you see it's not actually touching, it's just sort of kissing the old and the new. Anyways, this was completed last year, I think, and that's soon after it was completed, we had the sort of presentation there. But what are the inspirations? What are the stories that we tell? You know, these immersive spaces from Kubrick, you know, blue and red. There's a kind of, the door opens and red light pours out. There's the red theater and the bathroom. Go in the bathroom. There's a red half and a monotone half, so you can step from like the red space into the black and white space. Same in the blue theater. But these are stories we tell. These are ways for us to sort of push design forward. It's about lighting and effects, and that our clients understood. It's also about details. And so how do you sort of translate all that sort of optimism for the future into a kind of intricacy? And I felt that the 1920s and the 2020s are kind of resonant, right? We're sort of experiencing a kind of exuberance in a way with technology, with what we can do with material. So we picked up on some of the details, the corbelling, the herringbone, and we sort of turned that into a kind of undulating wave, a kind of curtain effect, if you will, with the staggered bricks. And we love working with builders and makers. And we said, you know, can you do this thing? And we just stagger the bricks like this. Working with the masons, they said, yeah, we can do that. And so sometimes I think you just have to ask, you know, talk to the mason, ask them what they can do. Oftentimes we just default to the kind of business as usual, and there is no surprise and no wonder and no story to tell. But this building, I think, has a kind of wonderful undulation. And someone said, oh, you know, you see all the flaws in the brickwork. I'm like, yeah, it's made by people. You know, it has a kind of beauty to it. If it were all lined up, it would be a rendering. But this is actually made by humans. So these are a couple of images from construction. I love sites under construction. That's the kind of theater or the ballet of construction. But we get moments like this where you're like, ah, there it is. There's my beacon. There's my destination. At the ribbon cutting, which is always fun, they always has to make some remarks. So I said, what am I going to say? You know, there were very eloquent speakers at the ribbon cutting. But I thought of something, and I'll tell it to you tonight because Aisha's remarks reminded me. A friend of mine teaches political science at MIT. She wrote an article about Canterbury Cathedral. It took 350 years to build. Ours took 10 years. We're ahead of schedule. 350 years to build. Generations worked on Canterbury Cathedral. And she argued that the community built the cathedral, but actually the cathedral built the community, right? That purpose, that sense of we're going to build this thing together, actually built a community around the cathedral. So they're both sort of building each other. And I think that resonates with what Aisha was saying about film and architecture. It brings people together in ways that so many other technologies don't. So with that, I'm going to stop and say, let's let's, well, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions, but we can move on with the next step of the program. All right. I like screens too. Turns out.
Podium or screen reader. I do have a question. Since we are in Boston, and Boston gets its reputation for being nothing but brick, you found a way of the, how did the Coolidge post that idea? How did they react? What was the story that you told of creating this?
Yeah, I'll tell you, that was not the first design we did. So we did a number of designs, many of them more elaborate. And you guys know, value engineering, value management. So we priced things. We sort of went back to the drawing board. We priced things again. I do think we tested lots of different things. At the end of the day, we said, it's really it's a black box, and it has no windows. And so, how do you make a black box feel not like a anti-urban sort of funk? It looks like a back of a building because it is sort of the back of a building, right? Can a movie theater have a front? How do you cinema park? Usually open the window, they turn the theater around, they project out of the building. But it's a box, so it is a decorated box, floating, and then the ground floor is super transparent and inviting. I think we're looking at the detailing for clues, and the herringbone brick on the front, and the idea that maybe we could sort of animate this material, so give it a sense of time or a duration or an effect. So when we proposed the idea of a kind of undulating brick wall, they sort of understood the metaphor. And then, of course, you're like, well, how do I translate that concept into something constructible? And that's when you sit down with the consultants and talk about icicles and shelves and mortar degradation and all those technical things. But for me, the magic of architecture is to translate a concept into a construct. How do we make that transformation? And so if I say that it's sort of undulating, the sun is animating it, I think we just have to look more carefully at architecture to see some of that magic. But I think they understood the intent. It's directly south facing, so it's always sort of lit, and I think it's a beautiful addition. It doesn't compete with the original. It sort of provides another face to it. For me, the ability of the masons to set the bricks that way has its own sort of beautiful story as well. So it's a box, but the decorated shed or the duck, it's a bit of a decorated duck. It's like a little bit of both. It's broadcasting, but it's not overwhelming in the sense of a billboard. Yeah, they had done it before, but it's not like impossible. It was not unthinkable. No one had asked, and if you usually architects are saying, can you just get them straight, line them up, they're trying so hard to line them up, but if you look around, Boston is a great city for seeing articulation and detail. Usually it's distributed in terms of like, there's a kind of normative plane and there's like articulation on the edges or around the openings. And sometimes we take a kind of exception and turn it into a norm, right? So there's a kind of staggered break as a course, sort of turn that into a field, and sometimes that transforms it enough to make it surprising. But yeah, there was a lot of back and forth in terms of like how much you could overhang, right? And I kid you not, there was a discussion of icicles forming in this New England weather. We had an icicle consultant. I'm sorry to say we did hire a consultant to advise us on the icicle formation of the brick. And we made mock-ups. We made 2 mock-ups. you do whatever it takes, I think, to try to bring an idea into the world. As you know, it's not always a straight line, but it was a pleasure to try. And I think working with people, can you do this? Can you do this? No. Okay. What's possible? How? And I think you have to ask. I think that's one thing I would tell students. Like, if you don't ask, no one's going to tell you, right? You have to ask. Can I do this? Can I try this? I feel like so often architecture defaults to the kind of the baseline of like, we've always done it this way. And I feel like if we're too timid, we don't get anything special because we're just reproducing what's already been done. So I always push my students to test the unimaginable and then prototype your way into the possible and ultimately to the built. Oh yes, over there. Hmm. Very timely question. It's true. I think everyone's worried about AI and the kind of post-human. Um, and at Harvard, half of the faculty is like, let's do it. Half the faculty is like, this is the end of the world, right? Our students are no longer able to write things on their own without checking with ChatGPT. Like, that is a crisis, a crisis of humanism, I think. On the other hand, these are tools, and every tool has a kind of ethics, right? There's an ethics to a Mainline. There's an ethics to AutoCAD, believe it or not. There's an ethics to Revit, and there's an ethics to ChatGPT. I do think, Nano Banana has an ethics. And so how do we train our students to be discerning in terms of how to use tools judiciously and not to become lazy and let the tool do it? At the end of the day, as a designer, you have to prompt it, you have to judge it, you have to validate it, and you have to, in a way, make it your own. So I'm against lazy AI. I'm for like laborious, ethical, recursive, iterative AI. How does that affect our built environment? I still think we're going to be laying bricks. You know, the idea of robots laying bricks, maybe. But yeah, I wouldn't want a building made perfect. Actually, I do like those imperfections. I didn't talk about it tonight, but I do a lecture on the architecture of UVA. You know, and they're powerful stories about the brick making and the labor that goes into setting bricks. And there are traces of human fingerprints in those bricks, and they tell incredible stories. I wouldn't want an architecture that didn't have those stories. That was so perfect that it doesn't embody that. And I've been asked questions like, well, who made the memorial, and what was their labor, and how was their labor? And I think that is us sort of grappling with the hidden labor within architecture. I think there's a whole generation that sees a building and thinks about, where did that material come from? Where was it transported from? What was the energy that was embodied in it? Who said it with what skills and what compensation? Is it just? Is it like fair trade architecture? I think those are questions we're going to hear more and more of. And I think that's the kind of exciting frontier of architecture. It's not a kind of formal game. It's a kind of more expanding the breadth of our understanding of architecture and our ability to produce a literacy around architecture. So people are literate about what it is that we're looking at that's hosting us and bringing us together. But I love that question. It is of the moment. Judy.
An engineer, I'm pretty hard for management cover whatever. But I'm curious, when does it happen to things when you're working to work with shallow? How do you come up with these ideas?
I don't know. I think all engineers are super creative people too. I think that as the creative act is everywhere. Where do ideas come from? I tell a story to my students. I'm like, well, if you're waiting for a lightning bolt, right, it's just gonna strike you at some point. You might wait for a long time. You know, you have to do something to bring on that lightning bolt. You have to bring it on by doing something, like build a model, build another model, write something. You know, take a nap. You know, do something. Stand up. You know, I prefer models. Build models. You know, you can't just wait for that lightning bolt. You have to do a bit of a rain dance to sort of bring it on. So, yeah, I'm a believer in doing, making and doing as a way to sort of release ideas. Richard Sennett wrote this great book, The Craftsman. He said, craft is not about tradition, it's about thinking while doing. And I like that. I like it when someone redefines something that I thought I knew what it was and tells me that it's something other. It's like, it's about having ideas while you're doing things, making things. And so I'm old fashioned that way.